1/4 a cup or 60 milliliters of water, 1 tablespoon or 15 milliliters of apple cider vinegar. Swirl these together and then I'm gonna pop them in the freezer. All right, now we're gonna be measuring out our dry ingredients. So we're gonna turn on our scale. Bob's Red Mill all-purpose baking flour. It has a good protein content for our pie. We need 330 grams. Close enough. So that is our 330 grams of Bob's Red Mill, or between 2 1/4 to 2 3/4 cup of flour. 1 teaspoon of xanthan gum for this. 1 tablespoon of sugar. 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. Give them a quick mix. We have frozen unsalted butter. We are going to be shredding it and then using that to give our texture and flakiness to our pie crust. We're gonna use 165 grams, 1 stick, plus 3.6 tablespoons. The cooler we keep this pie crust, the more we'll get beautiful flake and rise from our frozen butter. Dump it all in there. Make sure you get every last bit. Chilled water and vinegar. We're gonna crack an egg into that. Mix this together really well. Remember, keep this chilled so it's as cool as possible when it goes in. We've got our dry ingredients with our shredded frozen butter. Your bowl should feel cold. Mix a little bit. It will incorporate, I promise. You just have to be patient. We kind of want to mix this as little as possible. It does take a little patience, but it will come together. So now we're just going to form this into a ball, wrap it in saran wrap, and get it in the fridge. All right, I've got my cling film set up. Trick, I like to use cornstarch. Next, I'm going to take my pie dough we just made, get it out in the center there, and then just kind of quickly smash it into a tighter ball, using different areas where I cornstarched. You don't want to do this too long because every second that you have your heat from your hands on your dough, you risk melting butter. Alright, so we're going to be rolling out our pie crust. First thing you want to do is heavily cornstarch whatever surface you're working on. Remember, we talked about how sticky gluten-free dough can be, and without that gluten it doesn't tend to have the same strength as other kinds of pie crust, so you don't want to have to be tugging and pulling on it. It'll probably just break. So to help prevent any struggles when you're rolling it out, cornstarch the crap out of your rolling mat. Heavily cornstarch. Here I've got a pie dough that's been resting in the fridge. I said you want to do it for at least an hour. I ended up just doing it overnight. Split this in half. Since I'm doing mini pies, I want to give myself plenty of room. Gonna, as always, good layer of cornstarch. Gonna roll it out. So we're gonna roll it out into a rectangle. All right, so now we're gonna fold. Alright, we've re-cornstarched, so now we're gonna, first, I honestly just find beating your dough a little. It's a good way to get it started. Alright, so that is probably good, if even maybe a little bit on the thin side. We just need to cut out for our pies. So these are our pie shells we're going to be using. They are 5 inches. You want to make sure you give yourself enough overhang to give yourself a beautiful border. Alright, so you want to give yourself probably about 2 inches. I've marked little lines for myself of excess past the brim. That'll give you about 1 inch for depth and up to 1 inch for overhang to make your pattern. So I'm just going to go around and then place it over. Start shaping this how you want it to be. We're going to use 1 whole egg, 1 tablespoon of milk, and then mix those together really well. That's it, that's your egg wash. So first we are going to mix our brown butter and maple syrup, 3 tablespoons and 1 teaspoon of melted and cooled brown butter. We're going to get that into our mixing bowl. 1/3 cup maple syrup. I'm going to mix that pretty well. Our next step here, 1/4 a cup of brown sugar, 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon pecan flour. So we're going to mix all that together, the brown butter, maple syrup, brown sugar, pecan flour, and salt. Next we're going to be mixing some of our creamier ingredients here. We're going to use 1 whole egg plus 1 egg yolk, and that's probably about as much as I need to separate. 1/4 of a cup of heavy cream, 1/2 a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. Mix these together. We feel this is pretty well mixed. We're gonna pour it into our pecan mixture. Just a little bit more stirring here. We're gonna mix that in here. You want to get it really smooth. Perfect. This filling is ready to go in the pie. Going to seal the bottom with some corn syrup to help prevent any kind of moisture getting trapped in there and making for an unpleasant texture on the bottom. Alright, perfect. So we've got the corn syrup layer on. Now it's time for our egg wash. Finish off with some granulated sugar. Alright, this one's ready to go in the oven. Alright, so we've got our sweet potato. We're just going to coat it lightly in a little bit of olive oil, and then we're going to roast it at 425 until it's soft. So that'll probably take about 45 minutes, potentially up to about an hour. Alright, it's good to go in the oven. Alright, here you can see our sweet potato nice and roasted. It was in there for about an hour at 425 degrees. Cut it open. We're just gonna scoop that into our mixing bowl. We're not using any of the skin on this sweet potato. You wanna have at least a cup's worth. Add in 2 tablespoons of butter, and we just wanna make sure we mix really good. Three tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of white granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of dark corn syrup, 3/4 of a teaspoon of those. 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. You do, as always, want to make sure your vanilla extract is gluten-free. That is a common spot for caramel coloring and things that can sneak in there and not be gluten-free. Then we're just going to mix all of that together pretty well here. So we're going to add 1 egg. Mix that in. We're going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder and 1 tablespoon of heavy whipping cream. You can also substitute this with evaporated milk if you don't have any around. A pinch of salt, just stir that all together, and this is ready to go in your pie crust. Alright, so take your pie crust, which should have been chilling in the fridge for at least half an hour. And to help prevent soggy bottom, a little trick that we're going to use is to brush some corn syrup on the bottom. So I have some extra of that corn syrup here, just a little bit. You are good to scoop your filling into your pie. Sprinkle some granulated sugar. Perfect. This pie is ready to go in the oven. Alright, we're going to start the filling for our pecan pie. We're going to put 1 egg in there. Mix that pretty well. So when that's pretty well mixed, we're going to start adding our other ingredients. 1/3 cup dark corn syrup, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and 1 tablespoon of pure maple syrup. Don't use artificial maple syrup for this, and the reasoning for that is that artificial maple syrup is really just a simple syrup with some different kinds of flavors, but they pretty much never have maple flavor. So if you really want to accentuate with that maple flavor, you gotta get real maple syrup. 1/2 teaspoon of real vanilla extract, or just vanilla extract. We're gonna whisk this all together, or use your fork if that's what you're doing. Yeah, I'm gonna take out that lump of hard sugar, he's not breaking. Next we're gonna add a scant 1/8 teaspoon of salt. Same with cinnamon. Those mix really well. Perfect. And then the last ingredient for this part of the filling is butter. I'm gonna be using brown butter to really accentuate that rich, deep caramel kind of flavor that comes with a pecan pie. I have 1 tablespoon and 1 teaspoon melted and then cooled here. So I'm just gonna get that in there. Perfect. You're ready to fill your pie. Again, to prevent soggy bottom here, gently coat the bottom of that with some more corn syrup. So we're just going to lay down our pecans. You can have them whole or in bits. That is your preference. And we're just gonna spread a few more on top here, just to make sure we have a good amount of pecan in our pie here. Take that filling that we made, give it a good stir to make sure none of it settled while we were laying out our pecans, and pour it over. Now we just need to do our egg wash. Light layer, pressure on the whole thing. Sprinkle the edge with sugar. And this one's ready to go in. We are ready to start our final pie, our chocolate pie. First, you're going to take 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. After 2 10-second intervals and some stirring in between, I have it melted. Half a cup of white granulated sugar. Give that a good mix. Perfect. And then we're gonna go microwave this again in 10-second intervals. So I ended up microwaving this all together around a minute. We are gonna stir in a heaping tablespoon of chocolate, and this will melt in from the heat of the butter and sugar paste. Once you've got that fully integrated, then we're ready for our next step. 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder, 1 teaspoon of espresso powder, 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, sprinkle of cinnamon. The espresso does not make this coffee flavored in any way, it just really helps bring out and emphasize that chocolate flavor. Perfect, now we're ready for the next step. While this is cooling down, we're going to separately mix our wet ingredients. 1 egg. I'm gonna whisk that. 1/4 of a cup of heavy cream, and then 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Can mix our wet into our dry. I am going to be stirring while I'm doing it. Again, just any residual heat, I'm trying to prevent any potential scrambled egg. This should have a nice shine to it. It should be completely smooth. You don't want to have any kind of lumps of sugar or anything like that left. And it looks pretty good to me, so we are ready to fill our pie. Corn syrup, pour that filling in there, the egg wash. Be sprinkling sugar.